This passage from the first letter of John is actually such a well-written sermon on the topic of love, I almost don't need to preach. For all of those dutiful children who came to church for your moms, you're not that lucky. I'm going to preach anyway. But you have to admire the preacher here who wrote the first letter of John. Some people think the author was actually John, the beloved disciple, but other scholars tend to think it was more likely written by an elder in the Johannine community, which is a term scholars use for some of those first Christian churches of the Gentile territories. Either way, this preaching voice is one of a pastor who here in this letter attempts to articulate for them a powerful theology of Christian love in action. Listen to this text as it would have sounded as a sermon, as it would have been heard for the first time. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is of God. Love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Not some high priest with a lot of education. This is radical theology. For some of us, I think it forms the foundation of our United Church of Christ open and affirming statement, the verse that trumps all of Paul's preaching against homosexuality and all those Levitical codes that would have been in favor of stoning your daughter to death for cavorting with a boy you didn't pick out to be her husband. It says instead that it's not as important who you love, or even how you love, but that you love, and that you love thoroughly, gracefully, and well, the way God first loved us. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. It's that simple. Believing that good news is all we need to claim our inheritance, to be born again, to be adopted into the new covenant of Jesus Christ. It's so simple, even a child can qualify, even a tiny baby who first reaches up to squeeze that big, fat finger of his daddy. Even that child qualifies for admission to Christ's church. Even before confirmation classes, before Sunday school, before that child can even take communion because that child cannot eat solid food yet. Even before understanding anything else much at all, that child knows God. We moms and dads, we sense it right away when that bundle is placed into our arms. That child doesn't know much, but that child knows love. And this amazing fact flies in the face of a heresy of the church, the Gnostic heresy that most scholars believe John's letter is preaching against. Gnosis is the Greek word for knowledge. Gnosis, to know. In Greek, it's that silent G. In English, the silent K. But in John's time, certain teachers were going about claiming to have special knowledge, special insider knowledge, secret knowledge that they said was necessary to learn from them, only in their church, that would be necessary for salvation. Does that sound familiar? But God says to that, no, I gave you my beloved Son, Jesus. That is the only lesson you need to learn. And John proclaims that good news, saying, no special knowledge is needed, only the knowledge of the loving grace of Jesus Christ poured out for each one of us. God is love, and that love alone is what saves us. One of the saints of my last church taught what was, well, undeniably in circles of Sunday school teachers there at least, the most unruly class ever to pass through that congregation Sunday school. 3 of the ringleaders, the most rowdy boys, were known throughout all the grades as they had progressed up as terror, mayhem, and destruction. And this teacher who taught the 4th grade class was ready to quit. So he sat down with me, a big man reduced to tears, and confessed that he did not believe that they could ever sit still long enough or open up their minds long enough for him to be able to sneak any Bible knowledge into their little demonic brains. And so I asked him, well, how did you learn about God's love? And this great big smile started to spread across his face as he remembered. And he told me about when his first child was born, a son. That son's graduating from college this weekend. But out of the blue, the day, or the week rather, that his son had been born, he got a call from his childhood pastor, the saint of his childhood church who had taught him in his own confirmation class. He didn't waste any time. He said, Bob, do you get it now? Get what? Bob asked. God's grace, Bob. Redemption through grace. You told me back in class it didn't make any sense. In fact, I think you told me it was stupid. I think that's an exact quote, Bob. And then his pastor quoted to him from John's Gospel, chapter 1, verse 14. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. Oh. Sometimes God's amazing grace has to be seen to be believed. And God knew that about us.